I had no idea my simple no to my HOA president's demand to build her storage shed on my property would spiral into police sirens, false accusations, and the shocking discovery of years of corruption in our quiet suburban neighborhood. But as I watched her being led away in handcuffs, I couldn't help but wonder, what other secrets was she hiding in that shed she so desperately wanted to build? Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe if you want more Karen and HOA stories. The smell of fresh coffee filled my kitchen as I looked out my window at the peaceful morning view of my backyard. That's when I saw her, Barbara Henderson, our HOA president, measuring my land with a bright yellow tape measure. I nearly choked on my coffee. She wasn't just looking. She was walking all over my flower beds, crushing the tulips I'd planted last fall. I grabbed my phone to record everything and rushed outside. The chilly morning air hit my face as Barbara's fake sweet voice rang out. "Oh good, you're awake. I'm just planning the perfect spot for my new storage shed. Your side yard gets such lovely sunlight." My mouth fell open. I'd lived here for 5 years, kept my lawn perfect, never missed an HOA payment, and now this? "Barbara, this is my property. You can't just build here." She laughed like I'd told a silly joke. "Don't be difficult, dear. This unused space is practically begging for my new shed. Plus, as HOA president, I know all the rules." She waved her designer purse around, pointing at different spots. "I'm thinking right here. A beautiful 12 by 15 structure. It'll add value to both our properties." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm not interested. This is my land, and I have plans for it." That's when her sweet mask cracked. "Listen here," she snapped, her face turning red. "I've been running this neighborhood for 10 years. Every house, every fence, every paint color has my approval. You must be new to how things work around here." I wasn't backing down. "Actually, Barbara, I have my property survey right inside. Would you like to see it?" Her eyes narrowed. "Surveys can be wrong. I have other documents." She dug through her fancy purse and pulled out some wrinkled papers. These original development plans clearly show this as shared space. I looked closer at her papers. They looked photocopied and weirdly faded in some spots. Something wasn't right. "Those papers look pretty old, Barbara. My deed and survey are from when I bought the house. They're official and recent." She stuffed the papers back in her purse. "Well, we'll just see what the board thinks about this, and the city, and maybe even my lawyer." Her voice got louder with each threat. "You know, funny things happen to people who don't cooperate with the HOA. Last month, Sarah across the street got 7 violation notices in 1 week. I stood my ground. "Are you threatening me, Barbara?" She gave me the fakest smile I'd ever seen. "Of course not. I'm just trying to be a good neighbor. Think about my offer. It would be wise." She turned and clicked away in her expensive heels, somehow not sinking into my soft grass. That afternoon, I noticed strange marks on my lawn, little orange flags and spray paint lines. When I checked my security camera, I saw Barbara had sent someone to mark spots for her shed while I was at work. My heart raced as I pulled up the footage on my phone. But what really made my blood boil was the pile of gardening tools that mysteriously appeared along our shared fence that evening. This wasn't just about a shed anymore. This was Barbara marking her territory. As I picked up one of her rake handles from my rose bushes, a paper fluttered out of my mailbox. It was an official-looking HOA notice, but something about the letterhead looked off. I stayed up late that night, digging through old emails and HOA documents. The more I looked, the more things didn't add up. Barbara's official papers had different fonts than previous HOA notices. The signature lines didn't quite match, but the biggest surprise came when I found an old neighborhood map online, one that clearly showed property lines exactly where my survey said they should be. My doorbell camera pinged at midnight. I watched in disbelief as Barbara crept across my front yard with a measuring tape again, this time with a flashlight. What was she so desperate to hide, and why did she need this specific spot for her shed so badly? Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a battle that would expose secrets far bigger than a property line dispute. I was sipping my morning coffee when I heard the distinct sound of metal hitting dirt outside my kitchen window. Peering through the blinds, I nearly choked on my drink. There were 3 men in yellow, vests hammering tall metal stakes into my yard, while Barbara stood on her driveway, pointing and directing them like an orchestra conductor. I rushed outside, still in my slippers. "What's going on here?" The workers stopped mid-hammer as Barbara marched over, clutching a folder stuffed with papers. Her perfectly styled hair bounced with each determined step. "Oh good, you're up," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "These gentlemen are just marking the boundaries for my new shed. The HOA approved it last night in our emergency meeting." My jaw dropped. Emergency meeting? I wasn't notified of any meeting. "And this is my property, Barbara." She pulled out a wrinkled paper from her folder, waving it like a victory flag. "Actually, According to the original development plans from 1985, this section was meant to be common area. You've been essentially squatting on HOA land. She turned to the workers. Please continue. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Barbara, I have my property deed and survey right inside. This is private property, and those stakes need to come out now. The workers looked uncertainly between us. One of them lowered his hammer. Ma'am, if this is a property dispute, there is no dispute. Barbara's voice hit a pitch that made the birds flee from nearby trees. I am the HOA president, and I'm telling you to continue your work. I walked calmly to my garage and returned with my property folder, the one my lawyer had advised me to always keep handy after my first run-in with Barbara last summer over my mailbox color. As I started laying out documents on my hood, Barbara's face turned an interesting shade of red. She snatched up her phone, fingers jabbing at the screen. Fine. You want to play hardball? I'm calling a board meeting for tomorrow morning. We'll see how you like monthly inspections of your property. Maybe we'll discuss that crack in your driveway, or those unapproved wind chimes, or your garden gnome that exceeds height restrictions by 2 inches. The workers had stopped completely now, awkwardly holding their equipment. I noticed neighbors peeking out their windows, some even coming onto their porches to watch the show. Barbara was still ranting about violations when her phone connected. Charles, get the other board members on conference call now. Emergency meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp. And call Randy. You know, your cousin at the city planning office? I need original zoning maps of the development. All of them. That evening, I returned from work to find all my no trespassing signs torn down and crumpled in my recycling bin. But that wasn't all. Every single property marker, stake had been pulled up and replaced with new ones. Pushed 2 feet further into my yard, a bright yellow building permit was stapled to my oak tree, dated for tomorrow with Barbara's signature scrawled across it. As I stood there staring at the permit, my security camera pinged. The footage showed Barbara and 2 other HOA board members walking my property line during lunch hour, measuring and taking photos. One pointed at my house and shook their head sadly. My phone buzzed. An HOA email. Blast to all residents. Urgent meeting notice. Discussion of community safety hazards and property line. Violations. Attendance mandatory. Attached was a photo of my yard, craftily angled to make it look unkempt and dangerous, with a red circle around the area where Barbara wanted her shed. I sat down at my computer and began typing an email to my lawyer, but as my finger hovered over the send button, a strange thought struck me. Why was Barbara so desperate for this specific spot? My security camera caught her that night, flashlight beam bouncing across my yard as she paced the staked area, talking intensely on her phone. What was she planning to store in that shed that made her willing to go to such lengths? I walked into the HOA meeting room and immediately felt the tension. Barbara sat at the head table, wearing her fake pearl necklace and that smug smile I'd grown to hate. 20 of my neighbors filled the plastic chairs, all turning to stare at me like I was the bad guy. I clutched my folder of documents tighter, knowing the truth was on my side. Let's address the property dispute on Oak Lane, Barbara announced, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. She clicked her presentation remote and a photo of my yard appeared on the wall. My jaw dropped. The image was clearly edited, showing my fence 6 feet further into what she claimed was HOA land than it actually stood. As you can see, she continued, pointing with her perfectly manicured finger, Mr. Mitchell has been slowly expanding his property over the years. This aerial view from Google Maps clearly shows the encroachment. More doctored photos appeared, each one making my blood boil hotter than the last. I raised my hand, but Barbara pretended not to see me. Instead, she pulled out a stack of papers with official-looking stamps. I've taken the liberty of having our HOA lawyer review the original development plans from 1985. She paused for effect, scanning the room like a teacher about to scold a student. This entire strip of land was designated as community property for future development. That's when I noticed something odd. 3 board members, Tom, Sarah, and Mike, kept exchanging nervous glances. They looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and avoiding eye contact with Barbara. Something wasn't right here. I have the floor now, I announced, standing up despite Barbara's attempts to continue. I opened my folder and pulled out my certified property survey from when I bought the house. This official survey from 2 years ago clearly shows... That's not relevant, Barbara interrupted, her face turning red. The HOA bylaws clearly state, let him speak. Tom suddenly cut in, his voice shaking slightly. Other neighbors nodded in agreement. Barbara's eyes narrowed dangerously. I connected my phone to the projector and pulled up the county property records website. These are the official boundaries registered with the county, I explained, zooming in on my lot. As you can see, my fence is exactly where it should be. I also have receipts showing I paid property taxes on every square foot of this land. Murmurs spread through the room. Barbara's perfectly composed mask started to crack. She grabbed her water bottle with trembling hands, nearly spilling it. Furthermore, I continued, pulling out more documents. I have emails from the previous HOA board approving my fence location 5 years ago. Barbara, you signed these yourself. I held up the papers, watching her face turn from red to white. That's when she played her hand. Standing up so quickly her chair toppled backward. Barbara's voice turned ice cold. I moved to table this discussion pending legal review. She turned to face the other board members, her expression shifting to something threatening. And while we're examining property issues, perhaps we should review some other interesting decisions this board has made, like the approval of Tom's pool without proper setbacks, or Sarah's unauthorized solar panels, or Mike's oversized garage. The room fell silent. I watched the 3 board members' faces drain of color. They'd been caught in Barbara's web somehow, and now she was using it against them. But why was she so desperate to get this piece of my land? What could be so important about a storage shed that she'd risk exposing herself like this? I moved to approve the shed construction immediately, Barbara declared, her voice sharp as a knife. All in favor? Tom's hand went up first, followed slowly by Sarah's and Mike's. They wouldn't even look at me. Other neighbors started whispering, looking confused and concerned. This wasn't just about my property anymore. Something bigger was happening behind the scenes. As I packed up my documents, I noticed Barbara huddled in the corner with a man I'd never seen before, speaking in hushed but angry tones. She kept gesturing at a blueprint that looked nothing like a simple storage shed. When she saw me watching, she quickly rolled up the paper, but not before I caught a glimpse of what looked like underground lines or tunnels. The next morning, I found a certified letter in my mailbox. The HOA was giving me 48 hours to remove all obstacles from what they now claimed was community property. But as I watched Barbara's strange visitor return that afternoon, carrying what looked like geological survey equipment, I knew this fight was far from over. What exactly was she planning to build on my land? The loud rumble of heavy machinery jolted me awake at 6 a.m. that Saturday. My heart nearly stopped when I looked out my bedroom window. A small bulldozer was rolling onto my property, followed by 3 men in construction vests carrying tools and marking stakes. Barbara stood in her driveway wearing a smug smile, phone in hand, directing traffic like a twisted orchestra conductor. I threw on clothes and ran outside, my own phone already recording video. Stop right now! This is private property, I shouted, trying to keep my voice steady despite my racing pulse. The workers paused, looking uncertainly between Barbara and me. Keep working, Barbara commanded them. He's just trying to interfere with approved HOA improvements. She waved a paper in the air. I have all the necessary documentation right here. Those are fake documents and you know it, I said, stepping closer but staying on my side of the property line. I've already shown the board my deed and survey. No construction has been approved here. Barbara's face twisted into an ugly sneer. Just try to stop us. She raised her phone to her ear. Yes, 911. There's a man threatening me and my workers. He's becoming violent and I fear for my safety. My stomach dropped as I heard her lying to the dispatcher. I quickly dialed the non-emergency police line on my phone, keeping my camera recording. I need to report illegal construction and trespassing at my property, I explained calmly. The HOA president is trying to build on my land without permits or permission. By now, neighbors were emerging from their houses, drawn by the commotion. Some had their phones out, recording everything. Mrs. Chen from across the street called out, I saw everything. He hasn't threatened anyone. Several other neighbors nodded in agreement. 3 police cars arrived within minutes, lights flashing. Barbara rushed to the first officer, tears suddenly streaming down her face. Thank goodness you're here. He's been harassing me for weeks, trying to prevent necessary HOA maintenance. I don't feel safe in my own neighborhood anymore. I stood my ground, hands visible, speaking calmly. Officers, I have all my property documents right here, including the deed, recent survey and tax records. She's trying to build a storage shed on my land without permits or permission. These neighbors can verify I haven't threatened anyone. The senior officer, Sergeant Martinez, reviewed my documents while another officer spoke with Barbara. The third interviewed neighbors who'd witnessed everything. I could see Barbara getting more agitated as each person's story matched mine. Ma'am, Sergeant Martinez finally said to Barbara, I'm going to need to see your construction permits and HOA approval documentation. Barbara's face flushed red. I don't need permits for HOA improvements. As president, I have full authority. That's incorrect, the officer interrupted. All structures require proper permits from the county, and HOA presidents don't have authority to build on private property without owner consent. As if on cue, a county code enforcement vehicle pulled up. Someone, I suspect Mrs. Chen, had called them too. The code inspector took one look at the scene and started writing citations. Barbara's cool facade finally cracked completely. This is ridiculous. I've run this neighborhood for 15 years. No one has ever questioned my authority before. She jabbed a finger toward me. Ever since he moved in, everything's fallen apart. He's poisoned everyone against me. The construction workers quietly packed up their tools, wanting no part of this drama. As they drove away, Barbara screamed after them, "Don't you dare leave! I've already paid you." While officers continued gathering statements, I noticed Barbara's husband George watching from their driveway, his face ashen. Our eyes met, and he quickly looked away, hurrying back inside. Something about his reaction made me wonder what else he knew. Sergeant Martinez handed Barbara several citations. The construction crew is lucky they stopped when they did. I strongly suggest you cease any attempts to build on this property. Next time there will be arrests. As the police cars pulled away, Barbara stood alone in her driveway, clutching her citations. Her perfect image of HOA authority shattered in front of the whole neighborhood. But something in her eyes told me this wasn't over. She'd been too confident, too quick to call 911. Why was this storage shed so important that she'd risk breaking the law? I went inside to call my lawyer, my mind racing. In the background, I could hear Barbara shouting into her phone. "I don't care what it takes. Get me those original development plans by Monday." What was she really trying to hide? My hands were shaking as I looked through the photos on my phone of the illegal construction mess in my yard. The police had just left, and the crowd of neighbors was slowly breaking up, whispering among themselves. That's when I noticed Sarah Miller, our former HOA treasurer, lingering by my mailbox. Her face was pale, and she kept looking over her shoulder at Barbara's house. "Can we talk?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Not here. Maybe at the coffee shop down the street." 20 minutes later, we sat in the farthest corner of Bean's Coffee, away from windows. Sarah's hands wrapped tightly around her untouched latte. "I've been wanting to come forward for months," she said, pulling out a worn manila envelope from her bag. "But Barbara, she has dirt on everyone. Or at least she claims she does." My heart pounded as Sarah spread out paper after paper on the small table. Bank statements, receipts, contractor invoices, all with different company names, but the banking details were identical. "Look at the dates," she pointed with a shaking finger. "Every major HOA project for the past 3 years went through these companies. But they're all fake, all leading back to Barbara's personal accounts." I felt the blood drain from my face as I saw the numbers. Thousands upon thousands of dollars, siphoned from our HOA dues. The landscaping project last spring, the clubhouse renovation, the pool repairs, all inflated, all funneled through shell companies. "The shed," Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not really about storage. Barbara needs it to hide the evidence. There are boxes of documents in her garage. She's been getting nervous since the county started asking questions about our financial reports." A text message lit up my phone. "Barbara, of all people. My lawyer says we can settle this property dispute quietly. No need to involve more authorities." The threat was clear, but now it felt desperate. Just then, Mike Chen from 2 doors down slid into the seat next to us. "I couldn't help but overhear," he said quietly. "I'm a forensic accountant, and I've been suspicious of our HOA fees for years." He picked up one of the invoices, his eyes narrowing. "This contractor address? It's a mail drop. I checked last year when they supposedly did my roof inspection. Nobody there had ever heard of them." Sarah's phone buzzed, a string of angry texts from Barbara demanding an emergency board meeting. "She must have seen us talking," Sarah whispered, panic rising in her voice. "She'll know I told you." I felt a strange calm settle over me as I pulled out my own phone. "Let her call a meeting." In fact, I started dialing the local news tip line. "Let's make sure everyone hears this story." Mike was already scanning documents with his phone, muttering about digital evidence and audit trails. The bell above the coffee shop door chimed. We all froze as Barbara herself walked in, her face red with rage. But before she could reach our table, 2 men in suits stepped in behind her, holding up badges. "Mrs. Henderson? We're from the County Financial Crimes Unit. We'd like to ask you some questions about certain HOA expenditures." Barbara's face went from red to white in an instant. Her eyes locked with mine, and in that moment, I saw something I never expected: fear. The woman who had terrorized our neighborhood for years suddenly looked very small as she was led to a corner, table by the investigators. I gathered the documents with trembling hands. My simple property dispute had just cracked open a scandal that would rock our entire community. Sarah touched my arm gently. "There's more," she whispered. "So much more. The shed. It's just the beginning." My hands shook as I opened the thick manila envelope from the forensic auditor. What started as my fight to protect my land had turned into something much bigger. The local news van parked outside my house told me there was no going back now. The numbers in the report were shocking. Over 3 years, Barbara had created fake landscaping companies, billing the HOA for work that was never done. But that wasn't all. She'd been charging the association for improvements to her own property, including a pool renovation she claimed was for the community center. $200,000 had disappeared into her personal accounts. That morning, as I sipped my coffee, I watched Barbara walk out to get her newspaper like nothing was wrong. She waved to another neighbor, probably planning her next HOA rule to enforce. She had no idea what was coming. The police arrived at 9:15 a.m. sharp. I hadn't expected them to send 4 cars. My neighbor Tom, who had helped me gather evidence, stood beside me as we watched from my front porch. Barbara's face changed from confusion to anger when the officers approached her door. "This is harassment!" she screamed, still trying to control the situation. "He's just angry about the shed." The detective calmly showed her the warrant. I could see the moment it hit her. All those fake contracts, all those made-up companies were laid out in black and white. Her perfect mask cracked. She tried to slam the door, but they were ready for that. What happened next was like a scene from a movie, but scarier because it was real. Barbara tried to run through her back gate, but another officer was waiting there. As they led her to the police car in handcuffs, she looked straight at me. "I built this neighborhood," she yelled, mascara running down her face. "You're all nothing without me!" Her husband Jack came home during the chaos. He stood in their driveway, briefcase still in hand, watching his wife's carefully built world collapse. When he finally looked at the evidence, at the documents showing where all the money had gone, he just sat down on their perfectly manicured lawn and put his head in his hands. The story exploded across our small town. News vans camped outside for days. More homeowners came forward with stories about Barbara's rules, her threats, her demands for special assessments that now made terrible sense. The new HOA board found boxes of falsified documents in the association office, including plans to take over more residents' property for her community improvement projects. A week later, I got a letter from the county jail. Barbara wanted to make a deal. She'd tell everything about other HOA board members who helped her if I'd speak up for her at sentencing. I thought about all the neighbors she'd bullied, all the money she'd stolen from hardworking families. My response was simple: no. The new HOA president, Sarah Chen from 3 doors down, called an emergency meeting. The room was packed. Everyone wanted answers. She laid out the changes: transparent budgets, term limits, and a new rule that no board member could approve projects that benefited their own property. My land would stay mine, protected by new guidelines Barbara would have hated. These days, the neighborhood is quieter. Jack sold their house to a young family who actually waves when they see me. The shed never got built, but something better grew in its place. A community that stands up to bullies, even ones with fancy titles and official-looking papers. Yesterday, I saw moving trucks at another former board member's house. As they drove away, I noticed something odd. They left behind a locked filing cabinet in their garage. I have to wonder, was Barbara's scheme bigger than anyone knew? Maybe some stories don't end. They just lead to more questions. The information in this video is for informational and entertainment purposes only. HOA rules and laws vary by state and community.